Hey, what's up, everybody? We have a new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe right now. Leave a comment on the video. Share it with your friends. It's also a podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you listen with me, John Middlekauff, Apple, Spotify. We have you covered, as well as thevolume.com. We have merch. Check out. I got 3 and Out hats right now. Thevolume.com. Search the podcast. Buy some merch. Mike Zimmer to the Cowboys. One thing, I haven't seen all the details of the length of his contract. I would imagine Mike Zimmer got more than a 1-year deal. Let's just say this. In a vacuum, Mike Zimmer is an elite defensive coordinator. Elite. I think he is awesome. We saw him with the Cincinnati Bengals. We saw what he did as a head coach while he was also calling plays with the Minnesota Vikings. I say this all the time. How Rick Spielman isn't a general manager in the NFL is beyond me. He's easily one of the best personnel men of the last 10, 15 years in the NFL. But as a wise man told me once, coaches get second chances, GMs typically don't. But Mike Zimmer, to me, is a no-brainer hire for the Cowboys. I do think that it could work out midseason. Their defense is awesome, not skipping a beat. They're winning 12, 13 games, and we're judging them like normal. It's just going to come down to the playoffs, and everything's cool during the year. Or things could get weird. Right? What if the season doesn't go that well? They got McCarthy on a 1-year deal. The elephant in the room is going to be, what are they going to do with him long term? Right? Is he going to get a contract extension? Is he going to get fired? And that has a chance to get weird. So all the coaches that they were interviewing were big name guys, big personality guys. They interviewed Rex Ryan, Mike Zimmer. Do you know what those, Wink Martindale is a good example of this. You know what those guys give zero you-know-what about? Worrying about what they say when they say it. They're already rich. They don't have time to be political. Bruce Arians was the same way. They do not give a shit, which I like. And when things are going well, it's awesome. But if things get weird, and I'm not saying backstabbing or anything, I'm just saying it adds to the weirdness. So it's like the elephant in the room of something to watch because of McCarthy's contract. If you told me they hired Mike Zimmer, even with that personality, but Mike had just got a 3-year contract extension, I would not bring this up. But Jerry is adamant that, like, he's going to coach on this 1 year. Mike's cool with it. It just has potential to get weird. Speaking about getting weird, I watched one of the days, maybe it was when I was at the gym at the Cosmo. I flipped on the press conference for Mike McDonald and John Schneider. And pretty impressive, buttoned up, a little stiff for me, but I've heard he's a great coach, young coordinator from the Ravens. And I think the big question mark was who they were going to hire as their offensive coordinator. And they interviewed Chip, and I was at the volume party talking to Sherm, and I was like, that would be the worst hire alive. And listen, I give them credit. They didn't do it. They went with Ben Grubb, who is Kalen DeBoer's right-hand guy, who's been with him at Fresno State, who's been with him in Washington, went with him to Alabama. And on the surface, like, it's a no-brainer hire. He's clearly, at least been in college or pro, one of the best offensive coordinators in all of football. My only issue with it is Mike McDonald's a good example. Mike McDonald has coached in the pros, then he went to college, and then he came back to the pros. So he kind of has a lay of the land with everything. Recruiting, NIL, free agency, trades, practice squad, he's seen it all. The issue with Ben Grubb is he's never worked in pro football. Ever. And not saying that you can't make the transition. A lot of guys do. But if you look at a lot of coaches when they make the transition from college football, because that's where a lot of people start, myself included, you usually start at a lower level. Sometimes you start as a quality control coach. Sometimes you start as a position coach. And you work your way up to a coordinator. I do think it is difficult when you're coordinator, and I like Ben Grubb. I put the biggest bet I've ever made. Was a large reason was Ben Grubb against Steve Sarkisian's defense. And it paid off. It was awesome. But I've seen it before. And I think it can be very, very tough for these guys that have never worked in pro football, especially when you go to work and your head coach is the defensive guy. So the offense is all on you. Now, ultimately, football's football. Maybe the rules change a little, right? 1 feet, 2 feet. When you're down in college, you're actually not down in the pros if no one has touched you. So, I mean, there are little details here and there, but still, I mean, an outside zone's an outside zone. 7-yard out route, the different concepts are very, very similar. and they run I would say, a pro style type offense, right? But dealing with people who make more money than you can be complicated. It just can. And I understand taking that risk. Listen, I'm a pro risk taker, but we can't act like this is some no brainer hire. Say this: I would not have hired Chip Kelly, but I do understand interviewing him. One, the guy was begging to get out of UCLA, but he has coached in the pros before. He's proven he can do it. Ryan Grubb has not. And I'm not saying from a schematic standpoint. I'm not saying this guy will be overwhelmed in terms of getting guys open or calling run plays or anything. I'm just talking about on a daily basis, dealing with people who the rules of the way they operate, they're all under contract. When they're late, you don't like have them go run hills. You fine them. It can just be somewhat of a culture shock for guys. Speaking of a culture shock, I understood why Jeff Hafley, whatever that was a couple weeks ago, left Boston College to go be the defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. It's a better job. Boston College is a bottom 5, 8 job in all of Power 5. The Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator job, if you have success in 2 years, you'll be an NFL head coach. If they go to the playoffs the next 2 years and their defense is improved, Jeff Hafley will be an NFL head coach. The Chip Kelly leaving UCLA, and listen, I'm not here. I grew up actually a pretty big UCLA fan. A good family friend of ours, John Hofert, walked on UCLA's team with who was on those teams, like Jason Capono and some of those guys in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I loved UCLA basketball. My cousin Nick Amendola played for the football team in the early 2000s. I've always rooted for UCLA just UCLA sports. Clearly, when it comes to this changing landscape, they are behind the turn, or the changing adaptation of everything that's going on. Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Oregon, all these, Texas, all these programs are adapting. They're struggling. And I understand it's not a great job. But, I'm sorry, I don't give Chip Kelly the benefit of the doubt. I did not understand at the end of last season why UCLA didn't fire Chip Kelly and attempt to hire Jonathan Smith from Oregon State. He's literally from Pasadena. Maybe they didn't have the money because Jonathan Smith got like $7.5 million a year from Michigan State. Maybe Jonathan Smith would have rather gone to Michigan State. You had a West Coast guy who had spent his entire career, Boise State, Washington, Oregon State, leave. When you had Chip Kelly, who doesn't give a shit about you. Chip Kelly reminds me of these NBA players that are just total mercenaries. And this is a huge reason that no one really talks about. I think that doesn't resonate with the consumer anymore. It's like Kevin Durant's on the Suns. I don't think Kevin Durant cares about the Phoenix Suns one iota. I don't think it means anything to him. And I don't think he's alone. I think all these guys, the jersey means nothing to them. And maybe it's been that way for a while, but I'll promise you the Lakers meant something to Kobe. The Bulls meant something to Michael. The Lakers meant something to Shaq. Like, it used to mean something. Chip Kelly, like Nick Saban, Alabama meant a lot to him. Georgia means a lot to Kirby Smart. Bob Stoops would run through a wall for Oklahoma. I'm not a big Urban Meyer guy, but he cared about Ohio State. Chris Peterson really, really loved Boise State and Washington. Chip Kelly, if UCLA would have burned 5 years ago, wouldn't have fucking thought twice. Did not care. And I never understood the hiring. I don't understand Chip Kelly. I really don't. He was really good when I was scouting. And then he just kind of got fat, literally, and happy. And I think he's just average as the day is long now. And I understand Ohio State hiring him when Bill O'Brien goes to Boston College, because that's Ryan Day. He created Ryan Day. He hired Ryan Day originally in Philly, took him to San Francisco. Obviously, the connection through Urban Meyer, like he created this guy. But this notion that like Chip Kelly's still some dominant offensive coach, to me, is kind of laughable. And no one at this point in time with a major job feels like they care less about everything going on. And listen, you'd be like, well, you're just biased. He fired you. Yeah, I know a lot of people that stayed and worked for the Eagles for the next couple of years. Not one of them has a positive thing to say about him. Not one. I don't know many people, not beside like in his inner circle, that like the guy at all. And I base a lot of my opinions. Some of them are gut. A lot of them are shared experiences and people that I know that have worked for certain people. It's why I go all in positively on some guys. And it's why negatively I'll push all my chips in the middle of the table. I think this is laughable. I don't care that he left UCLA. I only care that UCLA thought he cared. They should have fired him years ago. It made no sense. I understand being desperate whenever you originally hired him, but he proved pretty quickly he sucks. He's not any good. Do you know who should be celebrating right now? University of Michigan, Ohio State. I would pay for this guy to be on the staff if I was those programs. Michigan just hires Wink Martindale to be their defensive coordinator. You know who I like in that matchup? Wink Martindale. I'll promise you that. So, listen, UCLA's got issues, maybe the programs. I don't even, my issue is not with Chip Kelly, like wanting to get out of a program that was heading the right way. My issue is with UCLA years ago not realizing how little he cared about the whole operation, how little he tried. And here's the other thing. He wanted out to be a coordinator. Every team in the NFL said no. He begged the Raiders. He begged Washington. He would have drove his car to McDonald's house and drove him across the country to work every day. All those guys said, no, we're not interested. And if Bill O'Brien doesn't take the Boston College job, I mean, he had nowhere to go. I think he might have just quit. I think he wouldn't have wanted to because he would have given up a lot of money, but it was definitely on his mind. But that's how Chip Kelly's really felt since like the Eagles fired him. It's like, whatever. I'm just kind of here. I hate the media, and then I go work for the media. It's like just a fraud. Listen, I've said this forever about Urban Meyer. He has some fraudulent characteristics. He's a big-time football coach. Can't be argued. What's the last time Chip Kelly's been good? A decade ago? It's 2024.